It's been 7 months since I posted my basic operation video on my Singer 15K treadle, and I had said at the time that I wouldn't go into details on actually winding the bobbin. Barry over in the UK, and yes, despite my accent, I do live in the US, held me accountable to providing more information, so here's the follow-up to that first video. We are going to look at the bobbin and bobbin casing in more detail, and then go ahead and actually wind thread onto a bobbin. Greetings! Welcome to 24 Washington Avenue, where I explore and investigate how threads from the past can still be used today. If you're interested in how I incorporate the old into my practical day-to-day life, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, check out other videos, and if you do have comments or questions, I would love to hear from you. Now let's get started.
To remove the bobbin access panel is slid to the side. With the needle at its highest point, the lever or latch is pulled and the bobbin releases. If you look at the back to see what happens when you lift that lever, there's a second piece inside that moves with the lever, sliding to the side as the lever lifts. When the bobbin is inserted, this interior piece locks around the stud on the shuttle body, preventing the bobbin case from sliding off as the machine is used. Pulling the lever, therefore, releases the bobbin case from the shuttle mechanism, allowing it to be removed. There's a second feature that is engaged when the lever is lifted. You'll see when I turn this over, the bobbin doesn't fall out. And the reason it doesn't fall out is because inside there's a small metal retainer that comes in from the side and places pressure on the side of the bobbin. Let's talk about the bobbins themselves for a moment. This notch in the center is very important because it slots over a small pin on the bobbin winder post. This ensures that the bobbin doesn't just spin freely on its own, but is moved only by the motion of the bobbin winder mechanism. At the other end of the bobbin post is a rubber-covered wheel which makes direct contact with the balance wheel. As one turns, the other turns, and the bobbin is able to wind. This latch lifts as more and more thread is loaded onto the bobbin, and when it reaches a certain point, it disengages and the winding is complete. To recap, the bobbin winder is pushed down, the thread displaces the latch as the bobbin winds, and when it is fully wound, the latch pops up and the mechanism is disengaged. As always, the balance wheel should spin towards you. The winding wheel spins in an opposite direction, away from you. So the thread is going to come up and over away from you too. Here's an empty bobbin, and here's some thread. There are a couple of ways that you can position the spool of thread. Firstly, you can mount it on the bobbin winding spool pin, pass it underneath of this guide disc and go straight up. Or if you're in the middle of sewing, you can leave it mounted on the upper spool pin, bring the thread over the front notch. In my Sewing Basics video, we used the rear notch when we were threading the needle. So you use the front notch now, bring it down and under the guide disc and up. And there are times when I've left the machine fully threaded and just pulled the thread straight across under the disc and up, but this is not advisable. The tension is high and you could probably snap a needle quite easily, not to mention that the thread will end up being wound more tightly around the bobbin, but I did want you to know that I have done it this way. For today's demonstration, we're using the front pin. To start the thread loading onto the bobbin, you have a few options. One is to use a finger to hold the tail down while you wind the thread a couple of times around itself. Just don't pull too hard as it can slip off. Another option is to pass it through the notch hole that the pin fits onto. The pin then serves to hold the thread in place. Again, if you pull too hard, it will slip out. But now you're ready to load the bobbin. One thing I feel obliged to mention about bobbins is that they come in different shapes and sizes, even when they're advertised as being made for the same model of machine. I've had bobbins in the same pack where the notch for the seating pin isn't cut out deep enough, so it's completely and utterly worthless because it won't fit in place. I've had some where the distance between the two sides is more narrow than others, which means that the latch here cannot fit between the sides, and if it can't fit in freely, the bobbin won't spin freely, so it won't load. Another useless bobbin. By example, this one's quite tight, and this one's very loose, and this brand new one is halfway between. Unfortunately, there's no easy fix for it. If it's a regular problem, you could try removing the bobbin winding mechanism and grinding down the side of the latch, but other than that, I'm not sure what to recommend except for returning the bobbins to the vendor. Back to winding the bobbin. You pass the thread through the notch, and if you want, for extra security, you can even pass it through the center hole. Place the bobbin onto the post, hold it in place with your left hand, and use your right hand to rotate the small wheel until the pin slots into the notch. Drop the latch down, give it a couple of turns, and then start treadling. You can then take your hands off. If you have a situation where your bobbin isn't loading evenly, the threads are bunching on the right or the left, there is a screw behind the guide disc that will allow you to slide it to the left or right. You'll have to use trial and error to find the correct spot, but it can be adjusted. You can oil through the hole here to ensure smooth motion of the winder mechanism. Just take care not to get any oil on the rubber wheel or it won't grip adequately onto the balance wheel. Should you find that your furious treadling looks set to launch your spool of thread into the air, you can always use a finger to stabilize it. So here we have it. The bobbin has loaded as far as it was going to go, the latch was displaced, the mechanism was disengaged, and we have one loaded bobbin. I can treadle now as much as I want to, and nothing's going to happen because the mechanism has been disengaged. Grab a pair of scissors, cut your thread, and you're ready to proceed. Do be sure to cut that initial thread short, otherwise it could get tangled in the bobbin and/or shuttle race assembly.